62 years old, and I just realized my son-in-law has been playing me for a fool. The thought hit me while I was sitting in my garage, staring at the empty space where my '67 Mustang used to be. $42,000. That's what Damien sold it for. "You don't drive anymore, Dorian," he'd said, all concerned and reasonable. "Let me handle this for you." I built that car with my daughter Sienna when she was 16, taught her the difference between a torque wrench and a socket wrench. She'd hand me tools, grease on her fingers, laughing when I'd curse at a stubborn bolt. That car wasn't worth 42 grand. It was priceless. But I signed the papers anyway. Because Damien's a clinical psychologist. Because he married my daughter. Because after Martha left me 2.5 years ago, I'd started believing what everyone kept saying, that I was getting forgetful, that I needed help managing things, that it was better to let the professionals handle it. I'm a retired civil engineer. I built bridges that thousands of people drive over every day without a second thought. I calculated load-bearing capacities in my head faster than most people could pull up their phone calculators. But somehow, I'd let myself become invisible. The garage felt cold. February in Connecticut always does. I looked at the oil stain on the concrete, the only proof that the Mustang had ever existed. My phone rang. It was Harper Caldwell, my old colleague from the firm. We hadn't spoken in months. "Dorian, I'm sorry to call out of the blue like this," she said. Her voice was tight. "But I need to tell you something about Sienna. My daughter had been dead for 3.5 years. What could Harper possibly need to tell me?" "I was there that night," she continued. "The night she died. I've been carrying this and I can't anymore." 3.5 years earlier, Sienna had died in what everyone called a tragic accident. She'd fallen down the stairs at her home. Damien found her. He called 911. He cried at the funeral. He gave a eulogy that made everyone weep. I was still married to Martha then, still connected to the world. But grief has a way of isolating you. Martha and I had already been struggling. 28 years of marriage had worn us down to polite strangers. Sienna's death was the final crack. Martha left 6 months later. She needed to find herself, she said. What she found was a yoga instructor in Vermont named Craig. I remember the day she packed. I was in the garage, naturally. She came to the door, her suitcase already in the car. "I can't do this anymore, Dorian," she said. No anger, just exhaustion. I didn't look up from the workbench. "I know." When I came inside that night, her wedding ring was on the kitchen counter. 28 years, reduced to a circle of gold on formica. I slept in the garage that night, on the old couch that smelled like motor oil and sawdust. The Mustang was still there, then. I remember putting my hand on the hood, still warm from the day's sun. After the divorce, Damien became my anchor. He'd stop by twice a week, help me with my finances, make sure I was taking my medications. 6 months after Martha left, when I was at my lowest, he suggested I sign a power of attorney. Just temporary, he said. Just to make things easier while I was adjusting to being alone. I signed it. Because he was Sienna's husband. Because he was a doctor. Because I was tired of being alone. Over the next 2 years, Damien systematically drained Sienna's trust fund. $320,000 that I'd built from my savings, meant to give my daughter security. He transferred it in small increments, each one just below the threshold that would trigger bank alerts. But I didn't know any of this yet. Not until Harper called. "What happened?" My voice came out rough. "I heard them arguing," Harper said. "It was bad, Dorian. She'd found something. Bank statements, I think. She was accusing him of stealing from her trust fund." My hand tightened on the phone. "I was outside in my car. I'd come to pick her up. We were supposed to go to dinner." Through the window, I could see her at the top of the stairs. He was at the bottom. She was yelling about calling you, about getting a lawyer. Harper's voice broke. And then he rushed up those stairs and shoved her. I saw it, Dorian. She didn't fall. He pushed her. The world tilted. Why didn't you say something? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Fear, shock, doubt. The same things that had kept me signing papers I didn't understand. I was a coward, Harper whispered. But I can't live with it anymore. You need to know the truth. After I hung up, I sat in that garage for an hour. Just sat there, the February cold seeping into my bones, my phone still in my hand. And suddenly, I was back in this garage 15 years ago. Sienna was 16, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, grease smudged on her cheek. We were rebuilding the Mustang's engine. Her idea, not mine. Dad, hand me the 3/8 socket. I'd given her the 1/2 by mistake. She'd looked at it, looked at me, then grinned. Close, but if you put the wrong tool on the wrong bolt, you strip the threads, then you're screwed. Language, I'd said, but I was smiling. You curse at bolts all the time, she'd shot back. That day we'd worked until sunset. Martha had called us in for dinner 3 times. Sienna's hands were raw, her nails blackened with grease, but she was glowing. We're gonna finish this, right, Dad? She'd asked. You and me? You and me, I'd promised. We did finish it. 2 years later, she drove that Mustang to her high school graduation. She'd wanted to drive it to her wedding too, but Damien had convinced her to rent a vintage Rolls-Royce instead. More elegant, he'd said. I should have known then. Sienna didn't care about elegant. She cared about things that were built to last. The phone was still in my hand. The garage was still cold, but I wasn't frozen anymore. I pulled out the folder Damien had given me last week, estate planning documents that he needed me to sign. I'd been about to do it, about to sign over my house worth $485,000, about to let him be the executor of my will, about to make it all legal. The rage came slowly, then all at once, not the hot, explosive kind, the cold, calculated kind that I'd used to solve engineering problems for 40 years. I thought about the bridges I'd built. You don't start with the deck. You start with the foundation. You do the math. You check your work. You make sure that when the weight comes down, the structure holds. Damien thought I was a weak old man. He was wrong. I picked up my phone and called my grandson Weston. Weston Ashford was 29, working at a law firm in Boston while finishing his law degree part-time. He'd always been sharp enough to get into law school, sharp enough to see through bullshit. We'd talked maybe twice since Sienna's funeral. Damien had encouraged me to give the kid space to process his grief. Gramps? He sounded surprised when he answered. I need your help, I said, and I need you to not ask questions until we're face to face. 2 hours later, he was at my kitchen table. I told him everything. Harper's call, the power of attorney, the Mustang, the trust fund, the estate planning documents. Weston sat across from me, his laptop closed. He hadn't opened it yet. He was just looking at me, the way you look at someone when you're trying to decide if they've lost it. Gramps, he said carefully, I need you to walk me through this again, slowly. I felt it then. The same doubt I'd been fighting for months. The same voice Damien had planted in my head. You're confused. You're mixing things up. You think I'm imagining this, I said. Weston rubbed his face. I think you've been through hell. Mom dying, the divorce, being alone. And Damien. Look, I never liked the guy, but this is murder, I finished. You can't say it. He met my eyes. Can I see the power of attorney documents? I handed him the folder. He read for 10 minutes, his expression getting darker with each page. Jesus Christ, he whispered. Gramps, this would transfer everything. Your house, your accounts, even your veterans' benefits. If you signed this. I was going to, I said. Tomorrow. Weston looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the moment he decided. Not to humor me, not to manage me, but to believe me. Okay, he said, opening his laptop. Let's see what this bastard's been doing. It took him 20 minutes to access my bank accounts. I'd given him the passwords years ago, back when he was helping me set up online banking. What we found made my stomach drop. Damien had drained Sienna's trust fund, all $320,000, transferred in increments small enough not to trigger bank alerts. He'd taken it over 2 years, using the power of attorney to authorize everything. He'd also put my house on the market. Quietly, through a private real estate connection. The listing was scheduled to go live next week. He's going to convince you to move into assisted living, Weston said quietly. That's the play. He'll say you're too isolated here, that it's for your safety. He'll use the money from the house sale to pay for your care, and then he'll disappear with everything. I thought about how close I'd come, how if Harper hadn't called, I'd be signing those papers tomorrow. Can we stop him? I asked. Weston looked at me, and I saw Sienna in his eyes, the same determination she'd had when she learned calculus just to help me with a project. Gramps, he said, we're not just going to stop him. We're going to bury him. The plan took shape over the next 6 weeks. Weston brought in a private investigator he'd worked with at his firm, a former cop named Marcus Chen who specialized in financial fraud. Marcus was mid-50s, with the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much. Weston introduced us at a diner in Hartford. Mr. Ashford, Marcus said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm. Weston told me about your situation. I want you to know. This case is personal for me. How so? I asked. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. An elderly man in a hospital bed, thin and frail. My father, Marcus said. He was a contractor, like you were an engineer. Built half the houses in our neighborhood. Smart guy, sharp as hell. He paused. Until my sister's boyfriend moved in with him. Started helping with his finances. By the time we figured it out, Dad had signed over his house, his truck, even his tools. Did you get them back? I asked. Some of it. After a 2-year legal battle that destroyed my relationship with my sister. Marcus's jaw tightened. Dad died 6 months after we moved him out. Doctor said it was a heart attack. I think it was a broken heart. He'd built that house with his own hands. He looked at me directly. I won't let another family go through that. Not if I can help it. I understood then why Weston had brought him. Let's get to work, I said. Marcus dug into Damien's life with the kind of thoroughness that would have made me proud if I wasn't so angry. Within 3 weeks, he'd uncovered a pattern that made my blood run cold. Damien had married Sienna right after she'd inherited money from her grandmother. He'd convinced her to let him manage her investments. He'd isolated her from friends, including Harper. And when she'd finally looked at the bank statements herself that night, she'd realized he'd stolen over $100,000. But that wasn't all. Marcus found out that I wasn't Damien's first target. 10 years ago, before he met Sienna, he'd worked as a financial advisor for elderly clients. 3 of them had filed complaints about missing funds. The cases were settled quietly, and Damien moved into psychology, a field where trust was the product he sold. He's a predator, Marcus said, showing us the files in my kitchen. He finds vulnerable people and bleeds them dry. Your daughter figured it out. That's why she had to die. The words hung in the air. Had to die. As if it were a business decision, which for Damien, it was. By week 5, we had enough evidence to approach the police. Weston arranged a meeting with Detective Sarah Chen, who specialized in elder abuse cases. We sat in her office on a cold March afternoon. Marcus had prepared a folder 3 inches thick, bank records, witness statements, background on Damien's previous victims. Detective Chen reviewed it carefully, her expression growing harder with each page. "Let me be clear," she said finally. "You have suspicious financial transactions, eyewitness testimony from 3 years ago, and a pattern of behavior. That's enough for me to investigate. But for an arrest, I need a confession or undeniable proof." "He'll confess," I said, "if he thinks he's won." Chen studied me. "You understand this is risky? If he suspects you're recording, if he doesn't say the right things, we have nothing. And if he gets spooked, we lose our chance." "He thinks I'm weak," I said. "He'll get cocky." Weston put a hand on my shoulder. "Gramps, are you sure about this?" I thought about Sienna at the top of those stairs, about the trust fund I'd built for her security being stolen, about the 2 years I'd spent signing papers and believing I was the problem. "I'm sure," I said. Detective Chen nodded slowly. "All right. We'll position a team outside your house. You'll wear a wire, high-quality audio, legally admissible in Connecticut. The moment he confesses to anything concrete, we move in." She leaned forward. "But Mr. Ashford, you need to understand something. Men like Damien don't confess easily. He's a psychologist. He knows how to manipulate, how to deflect. You'll need to push him, make him angry, make him feel cornered." "I've been building things my whole life, Detective," I said. "I know how to apply pressure." The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in early March. Damien called 2 days before to confirm. "Dorian, I'm coming by Thursday at 2 p.m., he said, his voice warm and concerned. "I've got all the paperwork ready. We'll get you set up in that nice facility I told you about. You'll be so much happier there." "I've been thinking about it," I said, playing the part. "You're probably right. I am lonely here." "That's exactly right," Damien said. I could hear the smile in his voice. "You'll have people around you, activities, proper care. It's what Sienna would have wanted." Using her name like that, like he had any right to speak for her. "I'll see you Thursday," I said, and hung up before I said something that would tip him off. Weston and Marcus came over that evening. We went through the plan one more time. "The recording device goes here," Marcus said, showing me a tiny microphone that would clip inside my shirt pocket. "It's voice-activated, high quality. Just talk normally." "What if he doesn't confess?" I asked. "Then we push harder," Weston said. "I'll be outside with Detective Chen and her team. The moment you say the code phrase, 'I need to ask you about the trust fund,' we know you're going for the confession. If he confesses to the murder, we come in immediately." I looked at both of them. My grandson, barely 30, putting his legal career on the line. Marcus, driven by his own father's tragedy. Detective Chen, who'd spent 20 years fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. "Thank you," I said. "All of you." Marcus shook his head. "Thank us when he's behind bars." Thursday came. I woke up at 5 a.m., couldn't get back to sleep. I made coffee, sat in the garage, looked at the empty space where the Mustang used to be. In 6 hours, either I'd have justice for Sienna, or I'd have nothing. Marcus arrived at noon to set up the equipment. The microphone was smaller than I'd imagined, barely the size of a shirt button, clipped inside my breast pocket. "Testing. Testing," I said. Marcus checked his laptop, gave me a thumbs up. "Crystal clear. Remember, Mr. Ashford, stay calm. Let him talk. The more comfortable he feels, the more he'll reveal." At 1:30 p.m., Detective Chen's team took positions, unmarked car down the street. Weston in the garage with Marcus, listening to the live feed. Harper had wanted to come, but Chen said no. Too many people would spook Damien. At 1:55 p.m., I was sitting in my living room, hands steady, heart pounding. At 2 p.m. exactly, Damien's BMW pulled into the driveway. He came in with his leather portfolio, all professional concern and warm smiles. He was 43, handsome in that polished way that came from expensive haircuts and gym memberships, the kind of man who sold trust for a living. "Dorian, how are you feeling?" He'd started calling me by my first name 2 years ago, a subtle way of stripping away my authority. I let it slide then. Not anymore. "Tired," I said, playing the part. "I've been thinking about what you said, about assisted living. Maybe you're right." His eyes lit up, just for a second. Then the concerned mask slipped back on. "I'm glad you're being open-minded about this," he said, setting down his portfolio. "I have the papers here. If you sign today, we can have you moved into a really nice facility by next month. They have activities, social events. You won't be lonely anymore." Lonely. He'd weaponized my isolation against me. "Before I sign," I said slowly, "I need to ask you about the trust fund." That was the code phrase. In the garage, Weston would be alerting the team. Damien's expression didn't change, but I saw his shoulders tense. "The trust fund? What about it?" "Harper called me. She said Sienna found something. Bank statements." "Harper?" Damien's smile didn't waver. "Dorian, Harper wasn't even around when Sienna died. She's—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Look, I didn't want to say this, but Harper had some issues with Sienna. Jealousy, I think. Sienna was moving forward with her life, and Harper wasn't." The lie was smooth, practiced. This was what he did. "She said she was there that night," I continued. "She said she saw you push Sienna down the stairs." Now the smile faded. Damien leaned forward, his voice gentle, concerned. "Dorian, I'm worried about you. This is exactly what I've been talking about. You're having trouble distinguishing between what's real and what someone told you. Harper is troubled. She might even believe what she's saying, but it's not true. So you didn't push her." "I loved your daughter," Damien said, and there was actual emotion in his voice, manufactured but convincing. "Losing her destroyed me, and now to have you accuse me of—" He shook his head. "This is why we need to get you help, Dorian, before these delusions get worse." Delusions. He was doing it again, making me doubt myself, but I'd spent 6 weeks preparing for this moment. "The trust fund had $320,000, I said quietly. "Where is it, Damien?" The mask cracked. Just for a second, I saw rage flash across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by something worse, cold calculation. "You've been snooping," he said. Not a question. "I've been paying attention," I replied. Damien stood up, looming over me. For a second, I thought he might do it, might shove me the way he'd shoved Sienna. But he was smarter than that. "You know what your problem is, Dorian?" he said, his voice rising. "You're weak. You've always been weak. Sienna knew it. That's why she didn't respect you. That's why she called you crying about how her father couldn't even keep his own marriage together." The words were designed to hurt. They did. But I kept my face neutral. "She figured it out, didn't she?" I asked. "The money you were stealing?" Damien laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Your daughter was going to ruin everything I'd built. She found the bank statements, started making accusations. She was going to call you, call a lawyer, make a big dramatic scene. She always had to be dramatic. So you pushed her." He stared at me for a long moment. The mask was completely gone now. What I saw underneath was cold and dead. "I made a decision," he said flatly. "In that moment, I made a choice between her destroying my life and me protecting what I'd earned. She was standing at the top of those stairs, screaming about lawyers and police and divorce. So I walked up there and I made sure she wouldn't destroy what was mine. There it was, flat, cold, completely devoid of remorse. You didn't earn anything, I said quietly. You stole it from her, From me. Damien's face twisted. You gave it to me, you stupid old man. Every paper you signed, every time you nodded and smiled and did exactly what I told you to do. You made this easy. He grabbed the estate documents from his portfolio. And you're going to sign these papers right now, or I'll have you declared incompetent. I'll tell everyone you're delusional, paranoid, a danger to yourself. I'll have you locked away where nobody will ever believe a word you say. I stood up slowly, my knees creaking but my spine straight. You made one critical mistake, Damien. What's that? You assumed I'd already collapsed. The front door opened. Weston came in first, followed by Marcus and Detective Chen. Behind them were two uniformed police officers, and behind them was Harper, her face pale but determined. Damien's face went white. He looked at the door, at me, at the officers, calculating, looking for an exit that didn't exist. Grandfather, Weston said formally, are you all right? I'm fine, I said. I looked at Damien. I'm better than fine. Detective Chen stepped forward, holding up her phone. Mr. Westbrook, we've been listening to your conversation. Every word. She nodded to the officers. Damien Westbrook, you're under arrest for the murder of Sienna Ashford, fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Damien didn't run. He just stood there as they read him his rights, his mouth opening and closing, like he couldn't quite process what was happening. As they put the handcuffs on, he looked at me one last time. You won't win, he said. I'll get a lawyer. I'll say you entrapped me, that you're senile, that you manipulated me into saying things I didn't mean. I stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear me. I'm a civil engineer, I said quietly. I spent 40 years making sure structures don't collapse under pressure. You made one critical mistake, Damien. You assumed the foundation was weak. But I built this trap better than you could possibly imagine, and it's going to hold. They let him out. Through my front door, down my driveway, into a police car, the same driveway where he'd parked his BMW hundreds of times, always playing the concerned son-in-law. When the car door closed, I felt Weston's hand on my shoulder. You did it, Gramps, he said quietly. Harper was crying. I should have done this 3 years ago. You did it now, I said. That's what matters. And the trial lasted 3 weeks. I sat in the courtroom every day, Weston on one side, Harper on the other. Damien wore expensive suits and played the grieving widower perfectly. His lawyer, a woman from Boston who charged $800 an hour, painted him as the victim of a vindictive old man who couldn't accept his daughter's accidental death. Mr. Ashford is elderly, she told the jury in her opening statement. He's been through tremendous trauma, and in his grief, he's created a narrative where someone must be to blame. I watched the jury. Some of them were nodding. But then Harper took the stand. She was shaking so hard she could barely raise her right hand to swear in. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Patricia Rodriguez, led her through her testimony gently. What did you see that night, Ms. Caldwell? I saw Damien rush up the stairs, Harper whispered. I saw him put his hands on Sienna's shoulders. I saw him push her. She tried to grab the railing, but she couldn't. She fell backward, and I heard... Her voice broke. I heard the sound of her hitting the stairs. And what did you do? Nothing. Tears streamed down Harper's face. I did nothing. I was a coward, and I've lived with that every day for 3.5 years. Damien's lawyer attacked her on cross-examination. You waited 3.5 years to come forward with this supposed eyewitness account? Yes. Convenient timing, isn't it? Right when Mr. Ashford needs someone to corroborate his accusations? Harper met the lawyer's eyes. I should have spoken up sooner, but I was afraid. I'm not anymore. When they played my recording in court, the room went completely silent. Damien's voice, flat and cold. I made a decision. In that moment, I made a choice between her destroying my life and me protecting what I'd earned. I watched his face as his own words convicted him. He wasn't looking at the jury. He was looking at me. And for the first time since Sienna died, I didn't look away. Marcus's investigation provided the context. 3 elderly victims from 10 years ago. A pattern of financial manipulation. Computer forensics showing Damien had researched accessing trust funds and power of attorney loopholes weeks before Sienna's death. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the foreman, a man about my age, a veteran by the pin on his lapel, stood up. On the charge of involuntary manslaughter, how do you find? Guilty. On the charges of fraud and financial exploitation, guilty on all counts. Damien's face went white. His expensive lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but he shook it off. At sentencing, Judge Patricia Morrison looked directly at Damien. You were in a position of trust, she said. You were a psychologist, a husband, a son-in-law. You used that trust to manipulate, steal, and ultimately to kill. This court sentences you to 15 years for involuntary manslaughter, the maximum under Connecticut law given the aggravating factors of financial motive and abuse of trust. Another 8 years for the fraud charges, to be served consecutively. 23 years total. Damien stood there, handcuffed, as they led him away. He didn't look at me this time. I think he finally understood. I had built something he couldn't tear down. I'm sitting in my garage again, 4 months after the trial ended. It's June now, and the space where the Mustang used to be is still empty. But Weston found the guy who bought it. He didn't want to sell it back. Said he'd fallen in love with the car. I understood that, but he did agree to bring it by sometimes. Let me sit in it, remember? Harper comes over for dinner once a week now. We don't talk about that night much. We talk about Sienna, the real Sienna, before Damien isolated her. The girl who learned to change her own oil, who called me at 2 a.m. from college because she was stuck on an engineering problem and knew I'd be awake anyway. Weston passed the bar exam last month. His first case as a newly minted attorney is representing elderly victims of financial abuse. He says he learned from the best. I've started volunteering at a senior center downtown, teaching basic legal literacy, how to spot financial scams, what a power of attorney really means, why you should never sign something just because someone uses the word love. One man came up to me after a session last week. He was about my age, maybe older. My son-in-law has been asking me to sign papers, he said quietly. I've been feeling like I should, like I'm being difficult if I don't. I sat down with him. We went through every document together. 3 of them would have transferred his house into his son-in-law's name. Trust your gut, I told him. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And you're not being difficult. You're being smart. He shook my hand when he left. Thank you for fighting, he said. It gives the rest of us courage. And people ask me sometimes if I have regrets. The truth is, yes. I regret not seeing what Damien was sooner. I regret every paper I signed without reading carefully. I regret the 2 years I spent doubting myself instead of trusting my instincts. But here's what I learned. You're not done. Even when you think you are. Even when everyone treats you like you're invisible. Like your best days are behind you. Like you should just fade away quietly. I'm 62. I lost my daughter. I lost my wife. I lost 3 years to a predator who saw me as nothing but a bank account with a pulse. But I'm still here. I still know the difference between a torque wrench and a socket wrench. I still understand load-bearing capacity. And I learned that the strongest structures aren't the ones that never take damage. They're the ones that hold together even after the weight tries to crush them. Weston calls from the kitchen. Gramps, coffee's ready. Be right there, I call back. In the empty space where the Mustang used to be, I can still see it. Sienna's hands covered in grease, her laugh when I'd curse at a stubborn bolt, her pride when we finally got the engine running. She didn't get justice for 3.5 years, but she has it now. And me? I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm building again. Lessons I learned the hard way. Never sign a power of attorney without independent legal review. Document everything. If someone isolates you from family and friends, that's not love. That's control. You're never too old to stand up for yourself. Elder abuse is prosecutable. You can fight back, and you can win. I built bridges for 40 years. The last one I built was back to my own strength, and it's still standing.